And so our agenda, what we're going to cover today is talk a little bit about why we need artificial intelligence, what the benefits are. We'll specifically talk about Cortex and the vision and what it does and where Microsoft is headed. We'll do a tour, a live demo of the features in SharePoint Syntex, which is the first release of Cortex. And then we'll have a discussion at the end about how to prepare for SharePoint Syntex. And with that, I'll just do a couple of introductions here. So for myself, my name is Jazz, and I work on some of our offering and business development within Gravity Union. I started my career over a decade ago, starting with Microsoft technology on the SharePoint product team. And it's really been exciting to me to see the evolution and to see how knowledge management and some of that automation is evolving and coming to life now. I also have a design background, so I'm really passionate about making sure that whatever we build, whatever we use within our organizations is usable, can be adopted by the people that are using them. So with that, I'll hand it over to Michael.
Thanks, Jazz. Michael Schweitzer, I'm the president and CEO of Gravity Union, and I sort of have been working in this space of enterprise content management over the last 10 years specifically on the SharePoint platform, with a certain passion around compliance and all things enterprise content management and driving adoption. And it's really kind of cool to see the platform mature to the point where we're going to automate some of the more difficult tasks that we ask our end users and get more value out of the platform. And I'll pass it over to Jeff for a second to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Jeff Dunbar. So I am a senior consultant here at Gravity Union. I have a lot of experience in Microsoft 365 and specifically SharePoint. I've also done quite a bit of Collabware, which is a third-party records management tool, from the requirements gathering all the way through implementation. I also spend a lot of time working with the Power Platforms, Power Apps, Power Automate, all that kind of stuff, AI Builder, Syntex, as we'll see here. So I am both Microsoft and Collabware certified, and I'll be kind of driving us through the demo today. Back to you, Mike.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll just get my picture up there. All right, moving forward. So if you haven't met us before, Gravity Union, we're a digital transformation consultancy. We have a passion around, I think, two main dimensions, one being compliance, so helping out with records management and regulatory needs with organizations. And typically our path to getting there is really driving a great user experience within SharePoint, Office 365, Teams, etc. We're both a gold Microsoft partner in collaboration. We're also a gold partner with Collabware, as Jeff noted, is a records management add-on for SharePoint and Office 365, and we also luckily became a great place to work up here in Canada. So if you're looking for a job, we are accepting resumes. We're also lucky enough to be a content services Microsoft partner. So I think there's 4 of us in Canada and maybe a couple dozen down in the States. But Microsoft has partnered with Microsoft partners in the market who are focusing on enterprise content management and all things content services, and including artificial intelligence and some that we're talking about today. And so we meet with Microsoft regularly and all the other partners in the ecosystem, and we're giving feedback to Microsoft, and we're seeing what's coming in the roadmap, which is quite cool. And then we also are once in a while given additional opportunities, perhaps incentives or free trial licenses to work with our clients in helping them adopt some of this cool new technology moving forward. I won't bore you too much about us, but we kind of work with large enterprise organizations, lots of government, lots of municipal clients, any kind of heavily regulated organization. We help move them into Office 365 and help with adoption, and then some fun facts that we'll have in a quiz form at some point in the future. So why do we need artificial intelligence? This is quite an interesting topic. I remember when I went to school several decades ago, there was an artificial intelligence specialization option, and which focused on Lisp, which was an old programming language for artificial intelligence. And I can recall back then that they actually killed off that program because the technology wasn't ready yet. But yet, I think recently what we've seen is over the past even decade really, is really a maturing of artificial intelligence capabilities in the marketplace. And so why do we care from a content services perspective? Here's a stat that's often referenced. And we see it referenced every year, and I have to double check the math, but I think we all inherently know that every organization, and even as individuals, we have an increasing amount of information and data being created on an increasing basis. We also know the pandemic was a huge push for a lot of organizations to move into the cloud, and to adopt Microsoft Teams, which can store documents, etc. So the amount of digital information in enterprise organizations is certainly increasing at an exponential rate. And we need to manage that content. We have to apply security to it. We have to be able to find it afterwards. You have to be able to manage it from a compliance perspective. And so we have all this data and documents and structured and unstructured information entering the enterprise at an increasing rate. And so, why we do that is we hope to get value from that. We want to be able to go back in and find those important documents and make decisions off the important documents and find our policy procedure, make sure we know what our contracts are. And so, really how we as organizations get value from our content is when we can find it properly, we can search for it, when it's described properly, when it's organized properly, when it's secured and classified, all that kind of good stuff. Unfortunately, we're not really good at managing content. I know a handful of people that will take the time to organize their bookshelf at home by alphabetical order, but most of us just don't have the time to properly organize and take our information. And I having worked with dozens and dozens of organizations, I've seen levels, say, of accurate classification against a file plan perspective as low as 20%. And I know I've heard of stats of being roughly half of all content in organizations is in the wrong location, or it's misclassified, or it's in duplicate locations, etc. So we're fundamentally not good at taking things, putting things in the right location. I get an invoice in, and that invoice is for a project. Well, does it go into the project site, or does it go into an accounting site somewhere? And that kind of cognitive load we typically get overwhelmed with quite easily. So, and we actually partnered with AIM, Microsoft, and AppPoint, and a couple companies on a bit of a study over the past year, having seen this massive adoption of Office 365. But some good quotes, like people just fundamentally don't care about classifying their documents as records. They have better things to do than to manage your content at a fine-grained level. And some great quotes around the lack of searchability of content. So really, how can artificial intelligence help with this? So a couple of things have come together over the past, say, decade. So one is cloud computing, and so now we have the raw computing power that we need to do some cool artificial intelligence tasks like machine learning, to be able to train our computers on how to identify content. The other thing is just the technology has come a long way, the programming languages and the science behind artificial intelligence. And so now we're at a point where we can leverage artificial intelligence to do some of that dirty work for us. The AI engines are going to help us organize our content, help digitize it, help classify it, even help understand the content. Is this a happy email or a negative email? So lots of cool stuff that artificial intelligence can do. If you haven't been on top of stuff, there's lots of cool YouTube videos of artificial intelligence administrative assistants who will phone and make a haircut appointment for you, all kinds of cool stuff. And so AI can also take all that information, get it properly organized, classified, tagged, and all that great stuff. And then that's really a stepping stone to really turn that information and data really into knowledge by connecting people to the right information that they need. And so that's going to really allow people within your organization to focus on higher value activities, right? So do you want your salesperson spending a Friday afternoon uploading purchase orders and taking client names and information, or do you want them following up with your accountants and having deep, meaningful conversations with your clients? So the idea here with artificial intelligence isn't to replace jobs. It's really to help end users, to help organizations get more value out of their content and data, and to allow people to focus on higher value activities. Another way of thinking about it, we can ensure content becomes discoverable. We're really turning data into knowledge. AI is going to really help with us with our privacy, security, and compliance. And then all that is also a bit of a platform for supporting high value downstream activities like workflows or integration, or whatever that happens to be. So lots of great stuff that can come with this. There's some research to say, this is sort of some that Microsoft quotes. I'm looking at the potential economic impact of Project Cortex on a large enterprise organization. And so we see certainly a high degree of savings from not having your end users have to spend time classifying, perhaps reclassifying, finding missing documents, etc., to put them to the right location. Up to $42 million of savings from doing, proper discovery. So all those lawyers' fees to find documents we'll save some money on, and then perhaps saving, $860K in legacy tools and professional services. So, I think the average large or enterprise organization has 5 enterprise content management systems, and so this is a bit of a foyer. Cortex can go out and actually integrate those systems as well, and perhaps help out with some of the migration in the future as well. So lots of value coming from this concept of adding artificial intelligence to our ECM platforms. And it has been a long time coming. Microsoft has actually been a leader in the enterprise content management space. As far as back as around 2010, they really got up into that upper right-hand quadrant of the Gartner research areas of being a leader in content management. And so certainly what we've seen in the market in general is most organizations will have a really easy time getting SharePoint and Office 365 adopted, and all of your content is now ending up in this SharePoint platform or Office 365. And so now really it's sort of Microsoft has a duty to help us manage that stuff effectively, to make sure that it's locked down from a security perspective, to make sure that we're respecting GDPR, to make sure that we're meeting our needs around privacy, regulatory compliance, records management, all that kind of cool stuff. And so certainly artificial intelligence is going to be a tool that's going to help organizations meet those goals around managing their content. Kind of looking at the market in general, this is actually a study from a couple of years ago, but we can really see Microsoft has been investing heavily, and this is sort of a bit of a graph or a chart showing us how many patents Microsoft has been earning in the artificial intelligence space. You can see they've really doubled down and are really investing heavily. And I remember doing a compliance in the cloud talk, and during the creation of the presentation, I had noticed that when using PowerPoint, that when I added my picture to the PowerPoint presentation, it automatically said, "Hey, it's a guy in a suit wearing glasses." It's not the exact. Hopefully, it's not the exact same outfit today. But so what's interesting, and why I was talking about this with the compliance talk is just, well, perhaps there's a concern about this picture leaving your network and going down to some servers. But the cool thing is that there's some machine learning happening. It's able to identify what the picture is, looking at it visually, and then tagging with information and metadata. So sort of a little micro example of how some of the artificial intelligence is going to help us manage your content, tag it, organize it, secure it, all that kind of cool stuff. So that's just sort of a general high-level concept of how AI is going to perhaps save the day. It won't quite be a silver bullet, but it's really going to help organizations manage their content effectively. So now we can kind of dive into Microsoft's incarnation of Project Cortex. And so Project Cortex, it is a moving target, and it can be a little confusing to keep up with things. It started off, the idea was going to be that Project Cortex was going to be a product unto itself that was going to be embedded within, say, an E5 license. But really, Project Cortex has grown to be a larger, what we're going to call an initiative within Microsoft to apply artificial intelligence to our content, to turn it into knowledge, to allow us to get our value out of our content management systems. And so an example of this and how it's been growing is that Project Syntex was kind of spun out of the Cortex initiative. I think it was released last October, and that's what we'll be looking at today. But it's really a broader, larger program of work at Microsoft to really layer on artificial intelligence to the platform. So it is a collection of solutions that was going to add AI to content services. It'll also help connect your Office 365 environment to those external systems to help manage the content as well. And it's really going to enable us to do advanced security compliance and workflows in the system. So diving deeper into Project Cortex and looking at a bit of the vision of this, sort of a different view into things is first this notion of content understanding. So the idea of content understanding is we have these no-code artificial intelligence models that we're going to use to classify and extract information and perhaps apply metadata to that content, which will allow us to do cool things downstream like knowledge extraction or workflows and all that kind of cool stuff. Kind of layered beside that, on top of that, is content processing, which is going to help with that automated capture, ingestion, and categorization of content using content-centric processes, perhaps using Power Automate to push that content through the organization. So I may have an image of an invoice, and then we'll help with the OCR and the identification of that content. And then finally, content compliance. And so I don't believe they quite have all this wired up, but it's coming soon. But it's the ability to, once we've taken the content, we've understand it, perhaps we've processed it, now we know exactly what it is, where it should go, and we're going to be able to apply those privacy labels or those retention labels to the content to help automate the application of information governance or records management in the platform. Looking at knowledge management as well. So knowledge management, if you will, kind of builds on top of the content processing and the automated extraction of metadata. And so this is really, the knowledge management is all about getting the information, the data information, turning it into knowledge by providing it to the people that need to use it. This is all about creating relationships between topics and content and doing stuff. Whereas the form processing and the document understanding is more about what we refer to as machine training, where we're showing the computer how to do stuff. This is more sophisticated artificial intelligence, where we're leveraging machine learning, where it's going to go off and automatically look at documents and emails and kind of bind everything together almost magically behind the scenes. So the first step is to do this knowledge identification. So Microsoft's going to go into your whole ecosystem of content and understand the different emails and documents and contents and conversations and teams, and be able to relate those things to each other to really start to create these knowledge bases of information. We're also going to be able to curate that a little bit, so fine-tune stuff, and even, I know at Google, for example, that they still have people that will fine-tune and polish the search results to make sure that they're as good as possible. And then that'll get surfaced through what we call, a topic card. So perhaps a more detailed example is, if I'm in my email, I can hover over the name of a project, and then that's going to show up a topic card, which is going to show us, who are the people that are on this project, where's the team site for this project, where perhaps are there additional SharePoint sites for this project, where's the contract. And again, we can only create this type of knowledge management because the other side of things has gone through and tagged things appropriately, has gone through the content processing and content understanding. So very, very cool that we can go into any email or any document and then perhaps look to see, well, what are the other related documents or emails or conversations or planner implementations that may be related to this, instead of having to hunt around for it. So very, very cool and exciting stuff. Looking at the architecture a little bit, so there is a sort of underlying platform or project, Cortex, that sits under what we refer to as the content services platform in Office 365. The knowledge management, what we officially refer to as Project Cortex. Oh, it's confusing because Project Cortex contains multiple products. Some of the knowledge management stuff is coming, I think, later this year. What was released back in October was Project Syntex, which is giving us the content center, which is where we're going to go in and train our artificial intelligence models to be able to understand our content. Looking a little bit at a different point of view. So the idea is that we're going to be partnering with the AI platform to help train it. And some cool stuff it can do certainly is do the automated object detection. So it can look at photos, it can look at business cards, look at scanned files, understand what they are. I know a friend of mine in Calgary created a cool application to look at a picture of a plant, for example, and understand what kind of plant it is, and give it some tags around that. Form processing. So if you have some standardized forms or templates, or you're getting invoices or some kind of relatively structured data, to be able to go into that form and extract, the form ID, the invoice amount, whatever that information happens to be. And then finally, kind of looking at perhaps more textual-based documents, looking at a huge, lengthy contract and being able to go into that contract and extract the contract amount, the contract end date, So slightly more sophisticated type of artificial intelligence of understanding your content. So looking at SharePoint Syntex then, so the sort of the first offering that's been made available to us in this ecosystem of Project Cortex. It is a subset of Project Cortex. It really builds on top of the SharePoint platform. It's where we leverage artificial intelligence to really teach the Syntex solution to understand what the content is and how to extract the information. And then we can basically then the next step is to then turn it into the knowledge management stuff through the Project Cortex capabilities coming downstream. So why use Project Syntex or SharePoint Syntex rather? Again, we're going to save a bunch of time in the classification, organization, and understanding of our content. We're going to reduce a bunch of human error. Unfortunately, computers are much better at the stuff than we are. They also will never complain about it. Obviously, there's been a chance to really improve our level of compliance within the organization, our level of privacy, the security of our content, and really we're going to be able to move at a much faster pace in terms of making your business more agile and moving things forward. So really, this will help replace some of that manual data entry, and instead of spending time opening up a PDF and looking at the customer name and looking at the invoice amount and looking at the invoice due date or the contract end date, and then copying and pasting that into a SharePoint metadata field, really it's more about getting your subject matter experts in line to train the system to identify that type of document, to understand where the pieces of information are, help extract it, and then set that as metadata on your documents in SharePoint. So content centers. I'm kind of diving into some of the mechanics of it now. So content centers are areas within the platform where we will go to create and train these models. Again, if you're familiar with artificial intelligence, you've probably heard of machine learning. And machine learning is where you basically give the system a bunch of example content to process and look at the results that it comes out with, and then pick whichever model was the most successful, and then run through several iterations. That's a relatively expensive and time-consuming way to do artificial intelligence. The content centers are more about training the system. So we're going to be more deliberately showing Syntex, hey, here's some example of some proper invoices, and here's some documents that aren't invoices, and then show where to extract the metadata from the document. So we can have multiple content centers. They can sort of each have their own little purpose, and we can lock them down with security. And it's just sort of like a little SharePoint site as we can go into. And then finally, just to kind of delineate between, there's really two main models: the form processing, more about repeatable structured documents like invoices or forms and stuff like that. And it could be images. And then the document understanding is more about those big, long, lengthy Word documents where you want to dive into that unstructured content and format to be able to pull information. So with that, we're going to move into the demo from Jeff.
Thanks, Mike. Just give me 1 second to share my screen out here. Yeah, hopefully that works. Okay. All right, so I'm going to walk us through a little bit of a demo, show a bit of the content centers, our form processing, as well as our document understanding. We don't have time really to train a full model. It would take us a little bit longer than 30 minutes. So I do have some pre-trained models, but I'll walk through kind of all the different pieces and features and what I've done with that model. And then I'll kind of show how it's actually going to extract that information in a live setting. So just to start, when you start with Syntex, you'll have to just do a quick setup at the beginning. So this will be something that your global administrator in your tenant will do. And this is kind of where we would manage that going forward as well. So I'm just here in our Microsoft 365 Admin Center. So under my Setup tab, you'll see that if you have Syntex licensing, you'll have an Automate Content Understanding. Obviously, I've already configured this, so we can see it's completed. If you haven't configured it, it'll kind of walk you through the basic steps. It's quite quick. You only set up a few different settings, and then it kind of goes for you. But you can also manage it from here. So with our form processing, so these are for those more structured documents, so your invoices that are always kind of in the same layouts. We can actually choose where we want to allow syntax to be created with these form processing models. So in my case, I've got it set right now to all libraries in SharePoint sites, meaning that basically anywhere in SharePoint, we can go ahead and we can begin to create one of these form processing models. You can also kind of limit it. So if we only want to allow certain people or certain sites to work with these form processing models, maybe not everybody has licensing. We don't want, to add all this SharePoint license or all the syntax licensing everywhere. And we just want a few individual areas. We can limit kind of our cost and target these at certain sites. And if you have a CSV, you can actually upload that whole CSV with a list of the sites you want rather than kind of manually searching and selecting those. And if you just don't want form processing, there is an added cost to form processing depending on your licensing. So you might not want form processing at all, and you can actually turn that off if you want to. Document understanding is a little bit different. So again, this is kind of for those unstructured documents. So maybe your contracts or your statements of work. Things that, they have some structure to them and general terms, but it's not necessarily always going to be in the same order, the same amount of pages. The information might be, at the bottom of this paragraph, at the top of the paragraph in a different one. So this gives us a little more flexibility. Now, this is what's kind of the default in Syntex. So we have it everywhere. By default, only we configure them through a content center. So when you do set this up, you do need to establish a default content center. As Mike mentioned, you can then create additional content center sites. So you might separate this based off of security, for instance. I don't necessarily want everyone that's managing, models to access my invoices or my, employee contracts, for instance. So we can secure and lock this down, just like we would with any other SharePoint site. So jumping over to view an actual content center. So once we've configured a model, we do get a little bit of analytics. So it's going to tell us, which models within this content center are being classified, how many files are processed, all the information that's being pulled from that. It'll tell us how many files are processed over time. And we can see all the models that live in here. So this is a SharePoint site, and you could technically build out the site into something with libraries, and you could classify content in here directly. I wouldn't really advise that because you probably want to keep this for those people who are building and training the models. Not all your workers who deal with invoices are going to create models. You're going to have probably a couple users who might train these models and manage these models over time, and the rest of the employees will likely, work with this data within their actual team site. This isn't a team site. We can't attach a Microsoft 365 group to it or anything like that. So we do want to kind of keep our structured team sites with document libraries, our data to be in its proper place, and then use this to really just manage those models. So when you come in here, you get libraries and pages and some of those typical things, but really all we really care about is our models and our training files. So the training files are the example files. It's a place that stores the examples that I've used to train a model. So in this case, I have a handful of different documents that are here, and I'll show you how those are kind of used. You'll also notice a model ID. And you'll notice probably that I had two models on the front screen potentially. And I'll talk about a little bit of difference here. You'll see that I'm only seeing documents associated to model 1. So we'll look at the models here and I'll explain a little bit why that is. You'll notice two models. Here's my one with the first ID, And here's my second model. They look a little bit different. We can see that this one is a contracts classifier, and it has the last train date, whereas this one's kind of invoices followed by a big long ID number. And if you expand this, you'll see that it's .ai builder. So that's kind of the difference between the two models here. So within our content center, we manage our document understanding models. And then our AI builder, so our form processing models, are actually managed through SharePoint and Power Apps. So I'll show you a bit about that after, but we'll kind of dive into what our contracts model looks like here. So if I click on it, it's going to pop up a new window with our actual model. So if you haven't configured the model yet, it's going to walk you through each one of these steps in order until you complete one. The rest will be grayed out. So the first thing is going to be adding those training files. So you have an option. If you already have your documents that you want to use for training and classification in your SharePoint site somewhere, you can add them directly from there. Otherwise, you can add them from your desktop or anywhere else that you might have those files. Once you do that, we can then train our classifier. So I've already trained this one, but when we do train it, you're going to have to put at least one negative example, and then I believe it's 5 positive examples. With the form processing, you only need positive ones. With document understanding, you need negative ones as well. So you can see here, I've labeled these as negative here, and these ones positive. This one I haven't labeled at all. I don't need all of them, right? I only need one negative, so I can actually skip this one if I want. It's quite simple to label them. I'm just telling it, no, this is not a contract. Or if I go to this one, yes, this is a contract. So this is how the machine starts to understand the difference between certain documents. This is kind of step one. So once I've labeled these, we then want to train it to recognize these. So you'll see here, it's actually going ahead and evaluating down here. And it's giving me positive or negative matches. So in this case, all my matches are positive. So these ones are not agreements, which is labeled as negative to being an agreement. And that's a match, meaning that Syntex knows, hey, this is not an agreement. So it's, in this case, it's a match, but the document is negative, right? Hopefully that makes sense. When they are agreements, we're matching to being positive. So don't get confused when it says match. It's not matching that this is an agreement. It's simply matching to what I labeled it as. Or not. If it didn't match, then it would give me a negative evaluation here, or no match. Once we train it, if we do want to extract, once we do train it, we do want to add explanations in order for it to better understand. So these could be things like a phrase list. So an agreement, right? I want to look for phrases such as service agreement or agreement or maybe contract agreement. And I build in these kind of words that it will look for in this document to help us match the document accurately. This is important, and you want to be careful with what you put in here, and you want to make it specific enough that it's not going to give you false matches. So a good example is something like resume. If I simply try and match the word resume, I can match a word in tons of documents, right? I'm not just going to pick up resumes. I'm going to pick up any document that's dropped in with the word resume. So you need to make sure these are specific enough and contain enough matches that it's not going to pick up false positives as well. So in this case, I've also got a date. So effective date, I know everywhere within here, I'm also going to have effective date. So you can have different explanations and different phrase lists, and you can kind of match these up in order to help it understand what these documents are. These ones are from my entity extractor, which we'll get into. So it's automatically applied these based off of what I've done a little bit later in the process. So once you have your explanations and you have all your documents trained, we can go to the next one. Oh, sorry. So it's already trained. We'll train it again. Once that's done, you can go back in and you can test and you can drop in some additional files if you maybe haven't labeled or added those. You can try some other ones just to see if it works. Once you are done training the model, oh, sorry, let me hop back into my model here. Went a little too far back. Once it's done, then optionally, you can create extractors. So you might not have metadata in every single file that you want to extract and use. If it's not useful, right, we don't want to spend a bunch of time trying to extract it if our workers aren't going to use that downstream in order to help them complete their job or manage things more effectively down the line. In this case, I've created 3 extractors here. So I want to extract who the contractor is. I want to extract when the effective date of that agreement is, and I want to extract their hourly rate. You might have some other fields that you want to extract, or you might not care about hourly rate and things like that, but you probably want to know who that agreement is with and what the effective date is of that is. Maybe you have an expiration date, depending on your contract as well, that you might want to track. So if I go into my effective date extractor, it's really the same process as when we train the file, only now we're selecting what we want to pull out of that file. So in this case, I've looked at these ones and I've said, well, these were false or not agreements anyway, so there is no label. So I've just checked, there's no label for us to match here. If I go to an agreement, here's the effective date that I want. So in this case, I've highlighted it and I've said, that's my agreement, or that's what the term I want to extract is in this document. And you'll see I've done it for 3 documents. These ones, again, you only need 5, so I've skipped these ones, and I haven't told it where that lives. So once you've selected those, again, you're going to train the model. So you'll notice it's processing down here again, and it's going to look at each one of these and try and find what we've labeled. So there we go. It can say, once again, I matched the date on both of these as I tagged it in the previous screen. And these ones had no label. So again, we've matched. And we can see predicted and labeled up here. So you could have a different area predicted than you labeled. That would be a negative match. And it will tell you if, hey, I found this, but not where you said it was, for instance. Same as with our classification, we do need to add explanations in order to determine or help Syntex extract and choose what this information is. So in this case, I've used what's called a pattern list as well as a phrase list. So there's a bunch of built-in patterns, dates, addresses, phone numbers, that kind of stuff that we typically see in a lot of documents. Microsoft has gone ahead and built these for you, so you don't have to build it yourself. You'll notice there's a lot in here in our pattern list. So it's going to match a date that's 1-AAA. Sorry, I should say any number -3 letters, 2 numbers -3 letters, and so forth, so on. Kind of all those typical date formats. This is a lot to type in manually, so you have these here pre-configured for you. And you can choose to match capitalization and other things like that. A little bit different than our phrase list. So again, our phrase list, I probably haven't made these as specific as I should, depending on how you store your content and where you put it. But I've taken some simple things. So before my date, I know, it has made as of. More likely, you might have something like effective date and then your date, or a couple of variations of that you might plug in here. So you can have documents that are structured a bit differently. So maybe one says effective date, maybe the next one says, active date or start date. You could plug all of those into the phrase list and it's going to pick up the ones you want. Once that's done, again, you can test it with some different files if you need to. I'm not going to go through the testing at this point. It's the same, you just add additional files and it will predict it for you. So we'll exit our training. Once you've done all of that and you've built your model and you've created your extractors if you want them, you then can apply your model to one or many libraries. So the models, the understanding models can be, document understanding models can be used in many places within SharePoint. So in this case, I've applied it to 2 different libraries. They live within the same team site, but they don't need to. A little bit different with the form processing. Those are configured to a specific library. So every time you want to configure a new one, it has to be done on a specific library and it can't be then used in other areas. Once you've applied, if you ever do make changes, you'll just want to sync it just to make sure everything's updating and it's going to make sure that all new information is passed along to those libraries as well. One thing I didn't mention, I guess, is when you do this, it actually creates a net new, or it can create a net new content type for you, or it can be mapped to your existing content types. So if you already have a contract content type, we can map this model to it, and it's going to apply that to any libraries that you sync. It's going to give that content type in automatically. So it saves us that problem of manually going in and adding content types and making sure the proper content types are added. It'll take care of that for us. If you don't have a content type that already exists, it will actually create that content type for you with these entity columns that you've defined here. So in my case, it would create a contract agreement or a contracts content type for me, and it would create a column for contractor, a column for effective date, and a column for hourly rate. I'll just hop into my site here real quick. So here's one of the libraries that I applied it to. So my contracts library, you can see it does have a view called contracts. This is created automatically for me by the model itself, so I don't have to create the view. And you'll see those fields. So I have a contractor, effective date, hourly rate, and then it gives me a confidence score and a classification date as well, so that I can track what's been classified here. So I'm just going to drop some agreements in here quickly. And you'll notice it lets me know, hey, we're analyzing your files. One or more columns will be updated when it discovers values. So I know that the model is applying. You can also look at this I here. And if you click the information, it's going to let me know, hey, this library can classify documents for me. Hooray, I don't have to worry about it. And I can view the active model. And it'll show up in a second, and it shows me which models are on this library. So I could have multiple models on here if I wanted to, and I could drop multiple types of files in here. Again, we don't really recommend that. It can be hard to sift through those files. Your library gets large, harder to search and find your content. So we still advise having proper structure, separating your documents based on how you work and what type of documents they are. If I'm the person that manages the model and I have access to the content center, I can click Manage Model. It's going to take me to the Content Center. I can also ask it to switch the library view for me so that it shows me this view for contracts. Now, the document understanding does take a bit longer to process than the form processing. Unstructured documents, so it takes a bit longer to sift through and find the items, whereas our form processing is much quicker. And you'll see it actually just updated automatically. I didn't even have to refresh my screen. And it started to pull this one. So you'll notice it switched to contracts content type. It's extracted my contractor's name. It's extracted the effective date and his hourly rate. And it's given me a confidence score that's quite high and a classification date as well. So one thing to note about our confidence score, and it's something that probably needs a little bit of improvement down the line, is anything over 50% will match, or it will switch it to this content type. It might not find anything within it, but it will apply the content type of contracts to it. So this is where it becomes important that your explanation lists are detailed enough that you're not going to start matching at 50, 60, 70, probably even 80%. You want to probably have 90% plus accuracy to start matching. So as I said, if you put something like resume, you're going to match potentially tons and tons of documents out there, and you're going to get all these false positives. So I'm going to walk away from this one while we wait for all of the rest of these to kind of process. It's going to continue to work behind the scenes. And I'll just quickly go show us our AI model. Or our form processing in AI Builder. So in our Power Apps kind of center here, we have our AI Builder. So we can build a new model, or we can look at existing models. So here's that invoice model that we had seen in our content center, but couldn't do a lot with. So it is here. Again, we can come in, we can kind of check out what's happened. You know, if there's a draft that you're working on, it does have versioning, so you can start building on your model while it's kind of processing without messing anything up. And you'll see here, again, here's the documents that I've trained, the fields that I'm looking to pull out, and then I'm using Power Automate in order to extract this information. Now, Syntex has gone ahead and done all of this for me, so I don't have to configure the Power Automate or anything like that. So if I want to, I can edit this model. We do have an AI Builder in our YouTube, so you can go take a look at how the classification in AI Builder works. I'm not going to jump deep into that right now, but this is all here, and it is applied to my library. So you can look at your flow as well to see what it's doing, and you can check your history of that flow as well, and what's happened and if stuff has succeeded. So I'll go back to our library over here. So I'm actually going to look at our documents library in this case, because that's where I have my AI Builder set up for my invoices. Just an example, I did throw in some other documents here. So this is the other library that I have my contracts model applying to. So you'll see here it's already extracted all my information. And it's also recognized, hey, these two documents don't match. So it hasn't done anything. It hasn't changed my content type. It hasn't given me a comment score or anything, but you'll notice it did check it. So it's giving me a classification date. It didn't match any of the classifications for my models. So I do know that they've been processed and they're not of, contracts type. So I will drop my invoices in here as well. So again, once I drop these in, it's going to let me know, hey, we're analyzing your files. Again, I can click the I and I can view my active models. In this case, we'll see I have two models applied here, so contracts and my invoice form processing. So again, I can switch my views. I can manage an AI Builder. If I switch my library view, it's going to take me to my invoices view. We'll give it a second here and then we'll refresh, and hopefully all of our invoices will have been classified. So right now it doesn't know that there's any invoices that exist, so it's not showing me anything. And it can take a minute again for it to just kind of go through. There we go. We can see this one's starting to go, so it's found out that it's a invoice and it's starting to process it. If I switch back to my invoices, we should start to see them show up here. And there we go. We can see, hey, George St. Pierre, Ayla Wickenheiser, Steve Nash. These are all invoices. It's taken our client name. found the client address, our invoice number, the date, the due date, everything I've configured for it to extract. It's pulling this all out. And this makes sense that Steve Nash doesn't have an address, because if I actually look at this file, there is no address. So it's just got his name. So it's okay that I don't have an address. It's just going to ignore that field. It's trained well enough to know that, hey, here's the client's name, but there's no address with it. So this all makes sense. It's extracted all of that. And I haven't had to really do anything. So now I can come in, I can check my invoice dates, due dates, I can set up a reminder, and I can start to use the other features of SharePoint in order to help me work with this data rather than spend the next 30 minutes to an hour going through each invoice, tagging client name, client address, invoice number, date, yada, yada, yada. I can actually come in here and I can automatically see, hey, show me, all the invoices that are due this month, and I can follow up with those clients and see what's happening. I'll just quickly pop back to my contracts library here, see if it started to pick some of these up. It is being a little bit slow right now. So far it's only processed our contracts document or our Dylan Zimmerman agreement. I assure you the rest of them will be coming. And it will start to extract all of this information through them as well. We do have to be a bit patient as it processes all of these. So that's kind of my demo there to wrap up.
That's great, Jeff.
Yeah.
Just wanted to interject because we have had a couple of questions come through. So I want to make sure we address what we can while we have you there. One of the first questions is about having multiple models. So do you know what is the maximum number of document understanding models that can be on a library? Microsoft documentation doesn't appear to list this number.
I don't know what the maximum per library can be. Again, you want to be careful, right? Because you don't want to just dump all your files into one library. That library is going to get very large. It's going to be very difficult to work with that information downstream. So you do want to still kind of separate your content into appropriate document libraries and then apply only the models that make sense to each one of those libraries.
Yeah.
But you can apply those models to many libraries, right? So if each team manages their own invoices, you can build one invoice model and then in theory apply it to many document libraries.
And that kind of overlaps with another question, which is if we have multiple, models applied to the same library and multiple would match, is there an indication that can we prioritize them or which one wins out? And I'm not sure if you know the answer to that, Jeff. I'm pretty sure it's just whichever one gets to it first will win out. And I think talking to what Jeff was speaking about, because there could be a perception that, well, we don't have to put any effort into our information architecture now. We can just give one document library for the entire organization and have people throw documents in there and we'll let artificial intelligence sort it out. But you're still going to run into scalability issues, performance issues. There's a certain number of times that we can break inheritance on a given document library. We know that after 20,000 documents in the library, things start to slow down. After 100,000, like some things stop working. So you still will want to really separate your things out into proper buckets and documents and stuff like that. And as we've also seen, it takes a good degree of processing for the engine to go through and read a document and figure out what it is, so on and so forth. So I think if you start adding multiple models and many models to one single location, it'll just kind of slow things down and delay the time that it takes. I'm not sure, Jeff, if you have a more accurate answer, specifically if you have two models, they're competing, if there's a rule as to which one, if there's a tie, which one would win out, or does it kind of give up?
It's a very good answer, and I'm not sure if it's just whichever one it finds first or if it's based off a confidence score or something like that. So I actually don't have an answer to that. I would assume it's probably whichever model it runs through first and matches at least 50%.
We will do an experiment and let everyone know in the comments of the YouTube video.
So just a quick question about any idea if models can be applied to on-prem content in case clients are not keen on migrating existing large content.
I don't don't believe so right now. I know that they are looking at supporting, like, leveraging other platforms and systems. I'm not sure where it is on the roadmap for that specifically. My assumption is probably not, but they certainly are lots of Microsoft incentives to help you move into the cloud. So there's always that.
Perfect. And one last one. So just while we have a couple minutes here, we run our document classification with managed metadata, not content type. Is there any way to apply Syntex and have it auto-assign managed metadata fields instead of changing the content type?
So Syntex works great with managed metadata fields. You can set up, synonyms and all of that in managed metadata fields, and Syntex will actually pick those up. So if you have a synonym for, a client name, Gravity Union, GU, G Union, etc., it can match any of those, but it does rely on a content type. So it will create content type for you if you don't match it to one. You can then use that managed metadata fields and things like that, but it does have to have a content type, as you kind of saw in the example. It assigns it automatically. It'll create it automatically if you don't attach one, and it does classify to a content type.
Yeah, but I guess specifically, so for one example, if you had a contracts content type, and then you had like a contract type managed metadata field, is this a statement of work, is this a master services agreement, you could leverage the model you wouldn't have to have two different content types, one for each type of contract. You would be able to leverage managed metadata on that content type to specify the type of content that we're working with.
Well, thanks everyone for the questions. And if there's any more, you can feel free to reach out to us. We'll share our contact info at the end. Up on the screen there, you just see a quick process that we have crafted to get started with this technology with Syntex. And so you can see the steps there, and just at a high level, it's important to understand the technology like we're doing today, prepare the platform, make sure you have modern SharePoint sites. And then it's really important, that middle step there, to think about the business use cases. We've talked about invoices and resumes and contracts, but there might be other unstructured data that you want to apply to this. And so prioritize that, get the budget, resourcing, and then follow a pilot model. We recommend working through one team at a time, just like our other project approaches. So reach out to us if you want to learn more about how we can help with that. And we've linked to a bunch of resources here as well, so you can learn more about the technology. There's a ton of information that Microsoft is publishing about this, and they also run a monthly office hours series, which is informative. And just a quick promo here for our next webinar. We're going to go dive deep into the audit trail, very exciting, into audit logs. And it's really important for compliance and regulations to keep these audit trails. So we're going to understand what works well in Microsoft 365, where some gaps are, and we'll be talking about how to work with that for your compliance needs. That's coming up in February. So thank you so much for joining. It was great having this interaction and the questions. If we didn't get to all of the questions, we will publish perhaps a short blog post after this, and we'll share the video of this recording. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.